This video shows how to playback or export results that we generate in PWGL, how to playback or export such results into other applications with other applications, like, for example, some virtual synthesizer or some digital audio workstation or music notation software. Okay, so we have some patch here which has some score, and by default it uses the internal QuickTime playback engine to play that back, and that for many purposes might be good enough. But you may want to change that, and I can change that with this menu, PWGL, and then redirect the MIDI stream to, interestingly, none. And none means that then it uses a virtual MIDI cable to play it back with something like, for example, Logic. Yeah, so I have in Logic here just some simple built-in piano, and I'm just using that for playback. And if I change PWGL redirect, MIDI redirect to none, then this is now played by Logic. And then that allows you to have all instruments that are available in Logic and all their controls you can have, which gives sonically much more freedom. And likewise, you can use other virtual instruments. So how is this set up? By default, this does not work, doesn't work out of the box. You need to do a few settings, ensure that they are correctly set. And the first thing you want to do is use this application, Audio MIDI Setup. You find that by default in your utilities folder. Yeah. Macintosh Applications Utilities, and that's there. And then if you start this, you may not see this window, but instead you may see the audio devices. And then you just need to make sure that in the window here menu you actually select the MIDI Studio. Okay, now within the MIDI Studio we have a virtual audio cable, if you want. That is the so-called EAC or IAC driver. By default in macOS this is switched on. This is switched off. You need to switch it on first, but you need to do this only once, and then it's just available. You first want to set up some ports, pressing this plus or minus buttons there. As you see, I have 3 of them. They are basically 3 virtual MIDI cables, which I can freely route to different applications. And then the actual important bit is you need to ensure that the device is online. And you see, as soon as I do that, Logic immediately recognizes, hey, there is something added or removed there. Yeah, so Logic we don't need to set up, that does it luckily by itself. You need to set up this, apply, and then if you want you can quit, and you only need to set up this once. If you restart, it still remembers that setting. But then within PWGL you might want to go to PWGL preferences, and under MIDI you want to make sure perhaps that your IAC device name is indeed your IAC driver. I'm not sure whether you really need to do that, but yeah, you can just double check that. But what you need to do is then again under PWGL audio MIDI setup, make sure that your MIDI output is actually sent to one of the buses you set up. You see, I have these 3, which I just showed, and yeah, I selected the first one here. You can also have MIDI input. I must say, I never used real-time MIDI input, but there you go, you can set it up. And once you have that, then this switch should work, that you have either the internal QuickTime synthesizer or none. And you see there are also shortcuts for that. And yeah, so we have then this in Logic. For example, you could also use some other virtual sound generator, for example, sampler like Contact, but then with many of them, as I said, Logic does it automatically, but with many of these other applications, you need to ensure that in their settings under, in this case, Contact preferences MIDI, you really have the IAC or EAC driver enabled. Otherwise, that won't be seen. It's like the equivalent of actually plugging your virtual MIDI cable into that application. Okay, that was enabling real-time output for your score editor. In addition, oops, no, I actually need to close Logic. Let's have that again. In addition, you might want to have the ability to export from what you have here a MIDI file, that these results can be then imported into Logic. And I briefly showed this before. In the menu here, I go under Utilities, MIDI, Score to MIDI file, and then Score goes into the MIDI file. And then I bring back Logic here. I evaluate this box for evaluate. And let's call this, for example, our MIDI output. MIDI, yeah, I had created this before, so I just use that again. Make sure you have an extension called MIDI, as I said before, so that your operating system recognizes that's a MIDI file. Save. Okay, I replace this, and this, yeah, depends on whether you use the file again. And then I can drag and drop this MIDI file. Yeah, that's the folder I saved it in. Into my digital audio workstation, for example. Yeah, just drag and drop it in here. Now it asks me whether I want to import the tempo or not. Yeah, in this case, I just say no. And it imports two tracks. One is the actual header. If I'm looking here, yeah, that sets a lot of continuous controller to some default value and otherwise doesn't do much interesting. So within Logic, it's pretty safe to just remove that usually if you haven't done some crazy setting here before. And then I just drag and drop this newly created MIDI region and put it in here. Now the tempo, of course, I didn't import that. That's a bit crazy here. So let's change that to the tempo we had in our original score, which was 60. Yeah, now once you have this, you can use this and freely edit that if you want, move it around, or yeah, chop it into pieces or whatever. Yeah, so once you import it into MIDI file, and then imported the MIDI file into Logic, then you can manually revise and mangle your results that you created within PWGL. All right, so now alternatively, you might want to generate a notated score, not something with an application like Logic, an electronic piece, but instead a notated score. And for that, we can use an external library that exports our score into an intermediate format, not MIDI, but music XML. MIDI is useful for electronic music, but music XML is more useful for notated music because certain notation-specific information, like for example, which accidental CDs, are retained in music XML. The music library, music XML library, is not built into Sibelius by default, and so, oops, I actually want to go here. I want to bring out this window. And our library we want to use is this one. It's available at GitHub by KISP which stands for Kilian Sprotte. And yeah, you can install and download it here, like I showed in another video. For my students, you can just use the list of libraries I provide in our virtual learning environment, and then you have everything in one go. So once you have that installed, then you control click, and you might want to load the library first. I did that before, but you can load the library. Yes, control U, I showed that before, and then go under Music XML. You see it's loaded already. Developer is Kilian Sprotte. And once I loaded it, I can load this box, export Music XML. So I just replace my score export for MIDI files, replace that by export Music XML, and then it's exactly the same process. I select the box, press V for evaluate, and select some output, file name, make sure XML is added as an extension, and thank you, Kilian. This library does it automatically. Okay, we replaced, I created this before in a test run. And once we have that, then your XML file now can be opened with some music notation software, like for example Sibelius, or if you don't have a commercial notation software like Sibelius or Dorico or Finale, you can use a free notation software called MuseScore, which you can freely download. Yeah, just Google for MuseScore, and now this imports that score. MuseScore is pretty good, but it's not quite as good as a commercial application, so therefore I'm actually still preferring something like, for example, Sibelius. And it is imported exactly the same way. Yeah, I just open it with Sibelius. And Sibelius brings up some dialog where I can finalize some settings. Here we go. But usually you can just leave these at its default values, press OK. And then you have our score imported in music notation. And as I said, with having the score in a digital audio workstation like Sibelius, likewise, if you have it in your music notation editor, then you can freely, then you can freely change your score. Yeah, like for example, if I take the individual pitch here, select it, I can change it, or I can grab the whole bar and then move the whole bar up and down, or yeah, do all the editing you can do in your notation software.